Nexus Point wasn't the kind of place decent people visited by choice. Built from salvaged starship hulls and questionable engineering, the mercenary station drifted at the edge of civilized space like a metallic tumor, attracting the kind of clientele who preferred their business conducted far from government oversight. Marcus Kane pushed through the crowded main corridor, ignoring the suspicious glances from beings whose species he couldn't identify and whose intentions he definitely didn't want to know. 5 years of freelance security work had taught him to read the subtle signs of potential trouble, the way conversations stopped when certain people walked by, the positioning of hands near concealed weapons, the careful distance maintained around individuals whose reputations preceded them. Today, the station hummed with more tension than usual, as if everyone was waiting for something to go wrong. "Kane," called a gravelly voice from behind one of the gambling alcoves. "You're late." Marcus turned toward Grex Vorthak, a four-armed Zolonian trader whose legitimate business ventures were outnumbered roughly 3-to-1 by his illegitimate ones. The alien's chitinous features were arranged in what might have been a smile, though with Zolonians it was hard to tell the difference between friendliness and predatory anticipation. "Traffic was heavy through the Kepler checkpoint," Marcus replied, settling into the booth's cramped seating. "Apparently the Colonial Navy has decided to crack down on unlicensed cargo transport." "Unlicensed cargo transport," Grex repeated with what sounded like amusement. "Is that what they're calling smuggling these days?" "I prefer alternative logistics," Marcus said, accepting the data pad that contained his payment authorization. "My job was keeping your convoy safe from pirates, not explaining your cargo manifest to customs officials." "And you did excellent work," Grex said, transferring credits with the speed of someone who preferred not to leave electronic trails. 3 pirate crews disabled, 0 cargo losses, and my clients never had to worry about anything more dangerous than motion sickness." Marcus checked the payment amount, noting that Grex had included the customary bonus for jobs completed without excessive collateral damage. "Pleasure doing business with you. Though next time, maybe warn me if you're transporting anything that glows in the dark and makes Geiger counters nervous." "Where would be the fun in that?" Grex asked, his multiple eyes glittering with merchant's humor. "Besides, you handled the surprise quite professionally." "Professional paranoia is why I'm still alive," Marcus said, standing up and adjusting his jacket to conceal the various weapons and defensive equipment that marked him as someone accustomed to violence. "Speaking of staying alive, any word on the Scythery situation?" Grex's demeanor shifted from jovial to concerned, his chitinous plates rustling in a way that indicated nervousness. "Bad news travels fast in places like this. 3 more worlds in the Outer Rim, all Scythery colonies. Same pattern as the others, entire populations vanishing overnight, no distress signals, no wreckage, just empty space where living worlds used to be. Any theories?" "Plenty of theories, none of them good," Grex said, lowering his voice despite the alcove's privacy screening. "The survivors from the first attacks keep talking about darkness that devours light, entities that consume matter itself. Most rational beings assume it's trauma-induced hallucinations. And the irrational beings think it's the end of everything," Grex replied grimly. "The Scythery have been sending warrior pilgrims to every major station and trading post, looking for something or someone that might help them fight whatever's destroying their people." Marcus felt an odd tingling across his shoulder blade, where the scar tissue formed 3 parallel lines that had never quite healed properly despite the best medical treatment available. The mark was a souvenir from the Battle of Kepler Station, where he'd been the only survivor of a massacre that should have killed everyone present. He'd spent 5 years telling people it was shrapnel damage, but the truth was considerably stranger and infinitely more complicated. "Warrior pilgrims," he repeated. "Are they causing trouble?" "Depends on your definition of trouble," Grex said. "They're not starting fights, but they keep staring at people like they're looking for something specific. Makes the clientele nervous when armed fanatics start conducting visual inspections." Marcus was about to respond when a commotion erupted from the station's main cantina. Shouting, the crash of breaking furniture, and the distinctive whine of energy weapons powering up suggested that someone's evening had taken a turn for the worse. "Sounds like my cue to leave," Marcus said, but curiosity and old military instincts made him move toward the disturbance instead of away from it. The cantina was a study in controlled chaos, with various species of dubious reputation drinking substances that ranged from mildly intoxicating to potentially lethal. At the center of the room, a small Paxarian trader was backed against the bar by 3 heavily armed Krogar mercenaries whose body language suggested they were more interested in entertainment than actual robbery. "Please," the trader was saying in accented standard, "I have already paid protection fees to the station authority. There must be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, little bird," growled the lead Krogar, a massive humanoid whose tusked face was decorated with ritual scars that advertised his willingness to inflict violence. "You think paying the station means you don't pay us? That's insulting to our professional reputation." Marcus assessed the situation with the kind of rapid tactical analysis that had kept him alive through dozens of similar encounters. 3 Krogar, armed with energy weapons and close combat blades, facing 1 unarmed Paxarian trader. The surrounding crowd was carefully ignoring the confrontation with the kind of studied indifference that meant they expected blood but didn't want to get involved. He could walk away. Should walk away. His contract with Grex was complete, his credits were in the bank, and getting involved in station politics was a good way to end up on the wrong side of people who preferred their conflicts resolved with high explosives. Instead, Marcus pushed through the crowd and tapped the lead Krogar on the shoulder. "Excuse me," he said politely, "but I think you're in my seat." The Krogar turned, his tusked face twisting into an expression of annoyed confusion. "Your seat, human. I don't see your name on it." "Must be the lighting," Marcus replied, stepping between the Krogar and the trader with the kind of casual movement that suggested he was accustomed to being threatened by beings twice his size. "Why don't we discuss this outside?" "Why don't we discuss this right here?" the Krogar asked, his hand moving toward his weapon. "Because," said a voice like music played on crystal instruments, 3 against 1 is hardly sporting odds. Marcus turned toward the speaker and felt his world shift sideways. Standing at the cantina's entrance was a woman whose presence seemed to charge the air with electricity. She was tall, even by human standards, with blue steel skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light and silver hair that moved like liquid mercury. Her crimson battle armor was a work of art, form-fitting plates that managed to be both functional and elegant, decorated with symbols that hurt to look at directly. She was unmistakably Sci-Fi, one of the warrior pilgrims Grex had mentioned, and when her eyes met Marcus's, he saw something in their golden depths that made his scar begin to tingle with uncomfortable warmth. "This is not your concern, Sci-Fi," the lead Krogar said, though his voice carried considerably less confidence than it had moments before. "You're quite right," the woman replied, moving forward with the fluid grace of someone trained in violence from childhood. "My concern is with the human." She gestured toward Marcus, and he instinctively turned slightly, giving her a clear view of his profile. When her gaze fell on his shoulder, where the scar's outline was visible through his jacket's fabric, her confident expression shattered completely. Her golden eyes went wide, her hand flew to her weapon, and then she stepped backward as if she'd seen a ghost. "That scar," she whispered, her musical voice cracking with shock. "It's from the prophecy. You can't be real." Marcus felt every eye in the cantina turn toward him, and his scar began to glow with the faint, pearl-like luminescence that had marked it since the day he'd nearly died at Kepler Station. Around them, the crowd began to murmur in languages he didn't recognize, but the tone was universal. They were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. "Lady," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the growing sensation that his life had just taken another impossible turn, "I think you've got me confused with someone else." "No," the Sci-Fi warrior breathed, her eyes locked on his shoulder where the scar's light was becoming visible even through his clothing. "No confusion. The mark of the guardian. The scar of 3 lines. The sign that the prophecy is real." She sank to one knee in the middle of the cantina, her crimson armor clattering softly against the deck plating, and spoke words in her own language that sounded like prayers and promises combined. Marcus looked around the now silent cantina, at the Krogar mercenaries who were backing away in obvious fear, at the crowd of hardened criminals and smugglers who were staring at him like he'd just spontaneously grown wings, and at the Scythery warrior who was apparently genuflecting to his shoulder scar. "Well," he said to no one in particular, "this is new." The maintenance level of Nexus Point was considerably quieter than the cantina, though the persistent hum of recycling systems and artificial gravity generators created a white noise backdrop that made private conversation possible. Marcus sat across from the Scythery warrior, who had introduced herself as Zara Vexhai, at a makeshift table constructed from shipping containers, trying to process information that challenged everything he thought he knew about his own existence. "So let me get this straight," he said, absently rubbing his shoulder where the scar continued to emit its faint, pearl-like glow. "According to your people's ancient prophecies, I'm some kind of chosen guardian who's supposed to save the galaxy from cosmic destroyers." "The texts are more poetic than that," Zara replied, her musical voice carrying undertones of something between awe and terror, "but yes, essentially accurate." "And you recognized me by this scar," Marcus continued, pulling off his jacket to reveal the 3 parallel lines that crossed his shoulder blade. "Which, according to you, matches exactly a prophetic symbol that's been preserved in your religious texts for over 1,000 years. Zara nodded, her golden eyes fixed on the mark with the kind of intensity usually reserved for religious artifacts. "The scar of 3 lines, borne by the guardian who will stand between the worlds and the devouring dark. The prophecies say it will appear when the cosmic balance is threatened by entities that consume existence itself." "Right," Marcus said, trying to inject some rationality into a conversation that had left rational behind several stops ago. "And how exactly do your ancient prophecies know about a scar I got 5 years ago during a battle that involved no Scythery and definitely no cosmic prophecies?" Zara's expression shifted to something that looked like embarrassment mixed with frustration. "That's where the prophecies become less specific. They speak of the guardian being marked by beings of pure light during the moment when darkness first touches the world of flesh, but they don't provide details about timing or location." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the maintenance level's temperature. "Beings of pure light. You've seen them," Zara said, reading his expression with the kind of accuracy that suggested she was either very observant or mildly psychic. "During the battle where you received the scar. They spoke to you. How could you possibly know that?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer would be more prophetic nonsense that he didn't want to believe but couldn't entirely dismiss. "Because the scar is glowing brighter as we discuss it," Zara pointed out, gesturing to his shoulder where the 3 lines were indeed pulsing with increased luminosity. "And because the prophecies describe the guardian as someone who has heard the voice of the eternal defenders but chooses to forget their words until darkness forces remembrance." Marcus stared at her, feeling memories he'd spent 5 years suppressing begin to surface with uncomfortable clarity. The Battle of Kepler Station, when his entire unit had been overrun by an enemy force that should have left no survivors. The moment when energy beings had appeared in the midst of the carnage, speaking in voices like crystalline bells about guardians and cosmic balance and responsibilities he wasn't ready to accept. "I told them I wasn't interested," he said quietly. "When they offered to make me some kind of cosmic champion, I said I just wanted to go home and forget any of it had happened." "And they honored that choice," Zara said, her voice gentling in a way that suggested she understood the weight of unwanted destiny. "The prophecies speak of the guardian's free will being sacred, that the mark would remain dormant until freely accepted." "Freely accepted?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, I've been carrying this scar for 5 years without having any choice about it." "I didn't accept anything." "You accepted the mark to save your comrades," Zara said softly. "The prophecies say the guardian will bear the scar willingly to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Marcus felt another unwelcome surge of memory, the energy beings offering him a choice as his unit lay dying around him. Accept their mark and gain the power to save his soldiers, or remain unchanged and watch everyone die. He'd made the decision in less than a heartbeat, thinking only about getting his people home alive. "They all died anyway," he said, his voice flat with old grief. "Every single one of them. Some guardian I turned out to be." The prophecies don't promise that the Guardian will save everyone, Zara replied gently. They promise that the Guardian will never stop trying. Great. Cosmic Participation Trophy. Marcus pulled his jacket back on, concealing the scar but not its persistent glow. So what happens now? Do I get a cape and a dramatic speech about responsibility? Now, Zara said, her expression shifting from reverent to grimly practical, you learn why the prophecies exist. Why my people have been searching for you across the galaxy. She activated a portable holographic projector, filling the space between them with three-dimensional star charts that showed vast sections of the outer rim territories marked in ominous red. The Void Devourers, she said simply. Entities that consume matter, energy, and life itself, leaving nothing behind but empty space. They've destroyed 17 worlds in the past 6 months, including 3 Scythery colonies. Marcus studied the projected data, his military training automatically analyzing the patterns of destruction. The attacks look random, but they're not. There's a progression here, a systematic approach to the targeting. They're moving toward the core worlds, Zara confirmed. Each attack brings them closer to the major population centers. Our strategists estimate that at their current rate of expansion, they'll reach Earth within 2 years. And you think I can stop them because I have a glowing scar and some energy beings once told me I was special? I think you can stop them because the prophecies have been accurate about everything else so far, Zara said, her golden eyes reflecting the holographic display's light. Including the fact that you would be found on a lawless station, protecting innocence from those who prey on the weak. That was just, Marcus began, then stopped. You've been watching me. Not watching. Searching. Following rumors of humans who survived impossible odds, who seemed luckier than chance allowed, who carried marks that defied medical explanation. Zara gestured to his concealed scar. There have been others, but none with the sign of the Guardian. Others? Pretenders. Hopeful souls who bore scars and claimed divine purpose, or charlatans who painted marks on their skin and declared themselves saviors. Her voice carried a weight of disappointment that suggested she'd been searching for a very long time. None of them could make the ancient artifacts respond. None of them carried light that the darkness feared. And you think I can? I think, Zara said, deactivating the holographic display, that finding you here, today, protecting a stranger from predators, while my people face extinction from entities that consume worlds, is either the most remarkable coincidence in galactic history or exactly what the prophecies predicted would happen. Marcus considered this, feeling his scar pulse with warmth as if responding to the conversation. What if you're wrong? What if I'm just a guy with unusual scar tissue and a tendency to stick my nose into other people's problems? Then my people die, Zara said simply. And eventually, so does everyone else in the galaxy. No pressure. Marcus, she said, using his name for the first time, I've spent 10 years as a mercenary, fighting battles for credits and reputation, because I couldn't bear the weight of believing in prophecies that might be nothing more than ancient wishful thinking. I left my homeworld because the idea of waiting for a savior who might never come was destroying my ability to function. And now? Now I'm looking at a human whose scar matches descriptions written a millennium before humans had even achieved spaceflight, whose presence makes ancient artifacts respond, whose very existence validates everything my people have believed about cosmic balance and cosmic guardians. She leaned forward, her expression intense with desperate hope. I'm asking you to come with me to Scythery Prime. To let our scholars examine the mark, to test it against our oldest prophecies, to discover whether you're truly what we've been waiting for. And if I say no? Then I respect your choice and continue searching, Zara said, though her voice carried the weight of someone who knew there wasn't time for continued searching. The prophecies speak of free will being sacred. I cannot compel the Guardian, only ask for his help. Marcus looked around the maintenance level, at the industrial setting where he'd been having the most important conversation of his life with a warrior from an ancient alien civilization who believed he was the key to saving the galaxy. 6 hours ago, his biggest concern had been collecting payment for a routine security job. Now he was apparently being recruited for cosmic guardianship by someone whose people were facing extinction. "Zara," he said finally, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you actually believe in the prophecies, or are you just hoping they're true because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate?" Her golden eyes met his, and in them he saw something that looked remarkably like his own mixture of skepticism and desperate hope. "Both," she said honestly. "Does it matter?" Marcus felt his scar pulse with warmth, as if the energy beings who had marked him 5 years ago were trying to remind him of promises he'd made and responsibilities he'd accepted in a moment of crisis. He thought about the void devourers, about worlds consumed by darkness, about the possibility that refusing this insane request might condemn billions of people to a fate worse than death. "Probably not," he said, standing up and extending his hand to help Zara to her feet. "When do we leave?" The attack sirens of Nexus Point had a particularly urgent quality that suggested whoever designed them understood that their audience consisted primarily of people who ignored most forms of authority. Marcus felt his scar flare with sudden, intense heat as the station's emergency lighting bathed everything in pulsing red that made the maintenance level look like the inside of a beating heart. "That's not a drill," Zara said, her warrior instincts immediately switching from conversation mode to combat readiness. "Something's wrong with the station's defensive grid." Marcus was already moving toward the nearest access terminal, his military training automatically analyzing the emergency broadcasts crackling through the station's communication system. "Multiple contact warnings, but the sensor readings don't make sense. Ships that register on mass detectors but not on energy scanners, moving at impossible velocities." "Void devourers," Zara breathed, her face going pale beneath her blue steel skin. "They've found us." The lights flickered and died, leaving them in absolute darkness that lasted exactly 3 seconds before Marcus's scar began to glow with pearl-white radiance that pushed back the shadows like a personal sun. Around them, the station's emergency system struggled to come back online, creating a stuttering light show of failing technology and sparking circuits. "How is your scar doing that?" Zara asked, staring at the steadily growing illumination emanating from his shoulder. "I have absolutely no idea," Marcus replied, grabbing emergency supplies from the maintenance lockers while his scar provided enough light to work by. "But I'm guessing it has something to do with those cosmic balance entities you mentioned." The station shuddered as something massive impacted the outer hull, and through the maintenance level's small porthole, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that made his brain struggle to process what he was seeing. Moving through space around Nexus Point were shapes that weren't quite ships, weren't quite creatures, and weren't quite there, writhing masses of darkness that seemed to devour light itself, consuming the stars behind them until sections of space simply ceased to exist. "We need to get to the civilian evacuation areas," Zara said, checking her weapons while Marcus gathered tactical gear from his emergency kit. "If the Devourers are here for you, they'll tear through the station population to find you. If they're here for me, wouldn't the smart move be to get as far away from civilians as possible?" Marcus asked, though he was already following her toward the maintenance level's main exit. "The smart move would be for you to use whatever power that scar represents to fight them," Zara replied, her crimson armor gleaming in the light of his mark. "But since neither of us knows how to do that, we settle for trying to save as many people as possible." They emerged into Nexus Point's main corridor to find chaos that redefined Marcus's understanding of the word. Beings of dozens of species were fleeing in every direction, some toward escape pods, others toward defensive positions, most toward whatever looked like safety even if logic suggested otherwise. The station's hull was buckling in places, and through the growing cracks, Marcus could see that familiar writhing darkness seeping in like liquid shadow. "It's not just attacking the station," he realized, watching the darkness flow along the corridor walls. "It's consuming it. Turning solid matter into empty space. Which means we have maybe 10 minutes before there's nothing left to evacuate from," Zara said, grabbing a Paxarian family that was running in circles and pointing them toward the nearest emergency pods. "Unless your cosmic guardian powers include emergency ship repair." Marcus felt his scar pulse with increasing intensity as the Void Devourer's darkness crept closer. The light it emanated seemed to actually repel the consuming shadow, creating a protective bubble around him and anyone standing close enough to benefit from its radiance. "Zara, look at this," he said, stepping deliberately closer to one of the dark tendrils that was consuming a section of wall. The moment his scar's light touched the darkness, it recoiled like a living thing encountering fire. "The light hurts them," Zara observed, her golden eyes widening with something that looked like hope. "You can actually damage these things." "Apparently," Marcus said, extending his hand toward another patch of consuming darkness and watching it retreat from the illumination flowing from his scar. "Though I have no idea how to control it or make it more effective." "Then we learn fast," Zara replied, moving to his side and immediately noticing that the protective effect extended to cover her as well. "Because I count at least 40 civilians trapped in sections of the station that are being consumed, and we're the only thing standing between them and complete annihilation." What followed was the strangest rescue operation of Marcus's military career. Moving through Nexus Point's collapsing corridors with Zara at his side, they gathered survivors by using his scar's light to carve safe paths through areas where the Void Devourers had begun their consumption process. The darkness that devoured matter fled from his radiance like shadows fleeing sunrise, creating temporary safe zones where civilians could reach escape pods or emergency shelters. "Behind you!" Zara called, spinning to fire her energy weapons at something that Marcus couldn't quite see directly, a writhing mass of unlight that moved like liquid death through the station's central hub. Marcus turned, instinctively raising his hand toward the threat, and his scar flared with such brilliant intensity that several people nearby cried out in pain from the sudden illumination. The Void Devourer, if that's what it was, let out a sound like reality tearing apart and retreated so quickly it seemed to simply vanish. "How are you doing that?" Zara asked, helping him steady himself as the effort left him momentarily dizzy. "I'm not," Marcus replied, feeling energy flow through him that definitely didn't come from any human source. "I think the scar is doing it automatically, responding to threats." "Like a defensive system?" "Like something that was designed specifically to fight these things," Marcus said, the realization hitting him with uncomfortable clarity. "Zara, what if the prophecies aren't about some mystical chosen one? What if they're about a weapon? Something the energy beings created specifically to combat the Void Devourers?" "Does it matter?" she asked, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward another group of trapped civilians. "Right now, you're the only thing keeping these people alive." She was right. As they moved through the station, Marcus's scar created an expanding zone of safety that allowed evacuation procedures to continue. Wherever the light touched, the consuming darkness retreated, giving refugees time to reach escape pods and emergency shuttles. But he could feel the effort draining him, as if the scar were drawing energy from some finite internal reserve. "Zara, I don't think I can keep this up much longer," he said as they herded the last group of civilians toward the evacuation bays. "Whatever's powering this thing, it's not unlimited." "Then we need to get everyone off the station before it runs out," she replied, checking her chronometer. "The evacuation ships can rendezvous at the Kepler Junction, but they need time to clear the station's defense perimeter." "What about us?" "My ship is docked on the lower level," Zara said, leading him toward a maintenance shaft that would take them away from the main evacuation routes. "If we can reach it before the station's completely consumed, we can cover the civilian ship's retreat." They dropped through 3 levels of increasingly damaged infrastructure, with Marcus's scar providing the only reliable illumination as the station's power systems failed section by section. Around them, the sounds of civilization ending echoed through the corridors. Metal buckling, atmosphere venting, and underneath it all, a sound like cosmic static that Marcus realized was the noise of matter being converted to void. "There," Zara said, pointing through a partially collapsed doorway toward a sleek, predatory-looking ship that seemed to be constructed from the same materials as her armor. "The Crimson Prophecy. If we can reach it." The sentence was cut off as something that defied description flowed through the wall beside them. Not darkness, not shadow, but the active absence of existence itself, reaching toward them with tendrils that unmade everything they touched. Marcus's scar erupted with protective light, but he could feel the strain of maintaining the barrier against something that wasn't just attacking them but attempting to edit them out of reality entirely. Whatever you're going to do, he said through gritted teeth, do it fast. Zara was already running toward her ship, trusting that his light would follow and maintain their protection. The ship has shielding that might be able to contain the effect, she called back. If we can get aboard before. The Void Devourer's tendril touched the edge of Marcus's protective aura, and he felt something fundamental tear inside his chest. The scar's light flickered like a candle in cosmic wind, and for a terrifying moment he thought the protection would fail entirely. Then something deeper kicked in, not the scar's power, but his own stubborn human refusal to let people die on his watch. Not today, he growled, pouring everything he had into the protective barrier while Zara reached her ship and began emergency startup procedures. The Crimson Prophecy's engines ignited with a roar that shook the failing station, and Zara's voice crackled through his comm unit, Marcus, move. Now. He ran, maintaining the light shield while sprinting across decking that was disappearing beneath his feet, literally racing the void as sections of the station vanished into non-existence behind him. Zara had the ship's boarding ramp down, and he dove through the opening just as the docking bay began to fold in on itself. Sealed and launching, Zara called from the pilot's seat, her hands flying over controls that looked more like instruments of war than navigation equipment. How many civilian ships cleared the perimeter? Marcus checked the tactical display, noting the dozens of small craft fleeing from what had once been Nexus Point and was now an expanding sphere of absolute nothingness. All of them. Everyone who made it to the evacuation zones got out. And the station? Marcus looked back through the Crimson Prophecy's rear viewport at the place where Nexus Point had existed. Empty space. Not destroyed, not exploded, simply, gone, as if it had never been there at all. Consumed, he said quietly. Completely. Zara was silent for a moment, her hands steady on the controls as she guided them away from the void zone. That was a major population center. 15,000 beings lived and worked on that station. 15,000 beings are alive because you knew how to find the evacuation routes, and I happen to have a really unusual scar, Marcus pointed out. Without either one of us, they'd all be gone along with the station. The Void Devourers came because of you, Zara said, though there was no accusation in her voice, only grim understanding. They're drawn to the Guardian's presence. Which means anywhere I go, I'm putting people in danger. Which means, Zara corrected, that the final confrontation is inevitable. We can face it on our terms, or we can let them hunt you across the galaxy while consuming everything in their path. Marcus slumped in a co-pilot's seat, feeling the exhaustion that came after extended use of power he didn't understand. His scar had dimmed to its usual faint glow, but he could still feel energy flowing through him that definitely wasn't human in origin. Zara, what exactly are we flying toward? He asked. Because if your plan is to take me to Sci-Fi Prime so your people can run tests while the Void Devourers consume half the galaxy tracking us, I think we need a better strategy. The strategy, she said, activating the ship's long-range communication system, is to reach Sci-Fi Prime before they do, and use the ancient Guardian artifacts to unlock whatever power is contained in that scar. Guardian artifacts. Weapons, tools, possibly vehicles, she replied, establishing contact with what appeared to be a massive fleet of Sci-Fi warships. Built by the same beings who marked you, left behind with instructions that they would only activate in the presence of the true Guardian. On the communication display, Marcus could see the fleet, hundreds of ships in formation around a world that gleamed like a blue jewel against the star field. But he could also see something else on the tactical readouts, dark shapes moving between the stars, converging on the same destination. They're already on their way to Sci-Fi Prime, he observed. The Void Devourers. They're not just hunting me, they're racing us there. Then we better hope, Zara said, pushing the Crimson Prophecy to maximum velocity, that the prophecies know what they're talking about. As they accelerated toward what would either be humanity's salvation or its final battleground, Marcus felt his scar pulse with energies that connected him to beings of light he'd met 5 years ago and a destiny he was only beginning to understand. Behind them, the void where Nexus Point had existed continued to expand, consuming space itself. Ahead of them, ancient weapons waited to be awakened by someone who still wasn't entirely sure he believed in prophecies, but who was absolutely certain that he wasn't going to let the galaxy end on his watch. "Zara," he said, watching the approaching fleet and the pursuing darkness, "I hope your people are ready for this." "They've been ready for 1,000 years, she replied. "The question is, are you?" Marcus looked at his reflection in the ship's viewport, seeing a human soldier who had somehow become the focal point of a cosmic war he'd never asked to fight. His scar glowed steadily against the starlight, and for the first time since leaving Kepler station, he felt ready to discover what that mark truly meant. "Let's find out," he said, as the Crimson Prophecy raced toward destiny at the speed of light. Sci-Fi Prime was everything Marcus had expected from an ancient warrior civilization and nothing he had prepared himself for emotionally. The planet's surface was covered in crystalline structures that seemed to grow directly from the bedrock, creating cities that looked like geometric forests reaching toward 3 amber suns. But it was the orbital defense platforms that truly took his breath away, massive constructs that hummed with energy signatures his human equipment couldn't even classify. "Welcome to the throne of prophecies," Zara said as the Crimson Prophecy descended through atmospheric entry protocols that involved more ceremony than practical navigation requirements. "Home to the oldest military tradition in the galaxy, and the most stubborn believers in cosmic destiny. And they're all waiting to meet me," Marcus observed, noting the thousands of Sci-Fi gathered in the landing plaza below. Even from this altitude, he could see the ceremonial armor, the raised weapons in salute, and what appeared to be religious banners fluttering in the planet's winds. "Not to meet you," Zara corrected as they touched down with surprising gentleness. "To witness the fulfillment of prophecy, or its final disproof." The welcoming committee was led by 3 figures whose presence seemed to make the air itself more dignified. The central figure was clearly the eldest, a Sci-Fi whose silver skin had the kind of luminescence that spoke of centuries of accumulated wisdom, wearing robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. "High Prophecy Keeper Thane Velneth," Zara whispered as they descended the ship's ramp. "If anyone alive understands what your scar really means, it would be him." Marcus straightened his shoulders, acutely aware that his human military bearing probably looked primitive compared to the elegant formal postures surrounding them. "No pressure at all." "Guardian," High Prophecy Keeper Thane said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones, "you arrive at the prophesied time, bearing the prophesied mark, in the company of the prophesied guide. Yet the darkness follows close behind. Your High Keeper." Marcus began, then abandoned formal titles in favor of direct communication. "Sir, I'm not sure I'm who your prophecies are expecting. I'm just a soldier who got marked by some energy beings and has been trying to figure out what it means ever since." "Show him the mark," urged one of the other council members, a younger Sci-Fi whose armor suggested military rank. "Let the ancient guardians judge for themselves." Marcus looked at Zara, who nodded encouragingly, then pulled off his jacket and shirt to reveal the 3 parallel scars across his shoulder blade. The moment the marks were exposed to Sci-Fi Prime's atmosphere, they began to glow with increasing intensity, and around the plaza, ancient crystalline structures began to resonate in harmony. "The Guardian's resonance," Thane breathed, his own luminescence brightening in response to the scar's radiance. "The artifacts are awakening." "What artifacts?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Instead of responding, Thane led them toward the largest of the crystalline structures, a towering spire that seemed to twist spacetime around itself in ways that made Marcus's eyes water. As they approached, sections of the crystal began to glow in patterns that matched his scar's illumination. "The Guardian's arsenal," Thane explained, placing his hand on what appeared to be a solid wall of crystal. "Weapons and tools left behind by the beings who first fought the Void Devourers, sealed until the Marked One returned to claim them." The crystal wall dissolved at his touch, revealing a chamber that contained nothing Marcus could immediately recognize as weapons. The space was filled with floating geometric forms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human perception could process, all of them pulsing with the same energy signature as his scar. I don't understand, he said, stepping cautiously into the chamber while feeling the geometric forms respond to his presence by orbiting closer. These don't look like weapons. Because they're not weapons, said a new voice, familiar, crystalline, speaking directly into his mind rather than his ears. They're keys. Marcus spun around, but saw no source for the voice. Around him, the geometric forms began to coalesce, taking on shapes that were almost recognizable, almost like the energy beings he'd encountered at Kepler Station. You, he said, addressing the apparent emptiness while feeling absolutely certain he was speaking to someone. You're the ones who marked me. We are the ones who prepared you, the voice confirmed, and now Marcus could see hints of luminous forms moving through the chamber. As we prepared others, on other worlds, against the day when the devourers would threaten the fundamental structure of reality itself. Others? Zara asked, her voice tight with controlled excitement. There are more guardians. There are many who bear marks, the voice replied. But few who have learned to accept what the marks represent. Fewer still who have the courage to use them. Use them how? Marcus asked, reaching toward one of the geometric forms and feeling it respond to his touch by transforming into something that looked almost like armor. What am I supposed to do with these? Not just you, the voice said, and Marcus felt a warmth that might have been approval. The Guardian was never meant to fight alone. The marks, the artifacts, the ancient preparations. All were designed to create unity among those who choose to stand against the darkness. Suddenly the chamber filled with additional presences, not the energy beings, but something else. Humans, Cytheri, and species Marcus didn't recognize, all bearing marks similar to his own, all drawn to this place by the same cosmic resonance that had brought him here. How many? He asked, watching as more marked individuals materialized in the chamber. Enough, the voice replied. If you choose to unite them. Unite them how? Instead of answering, the energy being guided his attention to the largest of the geometric forms, a structure that seemed to contain an entire star system in miniature. Touch it, the voice suggested. Understand what the marks truly represent. Marcus placed his hand on the construct and felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his individual mind. Suddenly he was connected not just to his own scar, but to every similar mark across the galaxy. Thousands of beings who had been chosen, prepared, and marked by the energy beings as part of a cosmic defense network. Through the connection, he could sense the void devourers approaching Cytheri Prime, but he could also sense something else, the combined power of every guardian mark activating simultaneously, creating a protective web of energy that spanned entire star systems. A network, he realized. Not individual weapons, but a coordinated defense system. The universe protects itself, the voice confirmed, through those who choose to be its guardians. Marcus felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders, not the burden of individual heroism, but the responsibility of coordinating a galaxy-wide defensive effort. Around him, the marked beings waited for his choice, their own scars pulsing in rhythm with his. What happens if we do this? He asked. The void devourers are contained, the cosmic balance is maintained, and the galaxy learns that some threats require unity rather than individual courage to overcome. And if we don't? Existence ends, the voice said simply. Not just life, but the fundamental structure of reality itself. Marcus looked at Zara, who was watching him with an expression that mixed hope, fear, and absolute trust in his judgment. What do you think? I think, she said, reaching for his free hand, that some destinies are worth accepting. Marcus activated the network. The response was immediate and overwhelming, thousands of guardian marks across the galaxy flaring to life simultaneously, creating a web of protective energy that made the void devourers consuming darkness recoil from entire star systems. Through the connection, Marcus could coordinate defensive efforts from a dozen different species, combining their unique capabilities into a unified resistance. It's working, Zara said, monitoring the tactical displays that showed the devourers advance halting as they encountered barriers of pure existence that they couldn't consume. For now, Marcus replied, feeling the strain of coordinating so many different minds and capabilities. But this is just the beginning. The network needs constant maintenance, continuous coordination. This isn't a battle, it's a permanent responsibility. Are you prepared for that? Marcus looked around the chamber, at the energy beings who had faded back to barely visible luminescence, at the other guardians who were returning to their own worlds to maintain their part of the network, at Zara who was already beginning to understand the magnitude of what they'd committed to. I'm prepared, he said, if you are. Always, she replied, and when she smiled, Marcus saw not the end of his old life, but the beginning of something unprecedented. A partnership that would span stars and species, built on the foundation of two people who had chosen to believe in prophecies that turned out to be cosmic defense protocols. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Guardian Coordination Station, a new facility built jointly by 17 different species to house the network's central command. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see ships arriving from across the galaxy, bringing new Guardian candidates and representatives from civilizations that had decided cooperation was preferable to extinction. Any regrets? Zara asked, joining him at the observation window while carrying data pads that detailed the network's expanding effectiveness. About accepting my destiny as a cosmic guardian? Marcus asked, then grinned. Only that it took a warrior with a prophecy complex to convince me that some scars are meant to be embraced rather than hidden. And I only regret that it took nearly losing everything to discover that some destinies are worth believing in, Zara replied, her golden eyes reflecting the lights of ships carrying hope across the darkness between stars. They stood together, watching the galaxy learn to defend itself through unity, and Marcus realized that the scar on his shoulder had never been a mark of isolation, it had been a symbol of connection, waiting for him to understand that the greatest victories aren't won by individual heroes, but by people who choose to stand together against the darkness.